deep down in my heart, my biggest hurt was in the area of money and provision. Now, God is so wonderful. He is so loving, so faithful. He was willing to spend 10 years to teach me one Bible verse. And that Bible verse is Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of me? To love mercy, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with him. Now, he used this verse to heal my deepest hurt and the fear of provision and money. So I'm going to spend some time and tell you about these three distinct episodes that mimic exactly like Micah 6:8. So 2005, I heard the first full-length sermon on tithing in my whole life. The pastor talked about this is probably the only area in the whole Bible where God invites you to test him in. And he cited Malachi chapter 3, verse 10, where God says, well, test me in this. If you bring your gross before tax income to where you're worshiping, to your church, then just watch. I'm going to open up the heavens and pour down so much blessings that you cannot even hold it. Now, when I heard that, I made a very counterintuitive and uneducated decision. I just thought, well, Roger, you're not really living according to biblical standards in any area of your life. So why not try out this area of money as the first area to obey God's word, 100%. So I did that. And when the pastor said this is an area where I could test God in, so I took it as it meant I don't have to go, fully tithing immediately. So I filled out an auto pay form, and the first month I just put down 1% of my base salary. That month went by, nothing. I didn't feel the pinch. So next month I changed the auto pay instruction. I changed it to 2%. That month went by, didn't feel the pain. So the third month I changed it to 5%. And it was a little bit harder, but still, it wasn't much too painful. So by the fourth month, I changed it to 10% on my base salary. And at that point, I thought, wow, well done. You're a good and faithful servant. You're a steward now. You're fully obeying God's teaching in the whole Bible. Every time I feel any kind of spiritual pride, God has a great sense of humor. Then he will show me the next homework. A few months later, it was year end and it was bonus time. And so investment banking was still paying pretty well back in 2005. So when I saw my bonus number, I was like, what am I supposed to do? Do I have to tithe on that also? And to add to the complexity, part of it is in cash, and that's the easy part to deal with. Once it hits your account, you can do whatever you want with it. The other part is a little trickier. That was in stock, and it's stock that I don't have access to for a few years. So I confess, initially, I had some very bizarre, muddled prosperity gospel thinking. I thought, okay, God, I'm going to go the extra mile. I am going to pre-tithe on the stocks, which I cannot even sell yet. Now, I'm not being greedy. I'm not asking you to bless it to go, go up 2-3 times. But if I pre-tithe, would you at least put a floor and give me some protection on the share price? Now, very shortly thereafter, I found out that God doesn't operate that way. And it took me basically 2 years to learn how to tithe properly without any kind of like crazy prosperity gospel thinking. Now, why do I say that tithing is God's way of teaching me in money terms how to act justly? The reason comes from Malachi chapter 3, verse 8, where God was so angry, he said to man, lowly man, you're stealing from me. And then lowly man says, well, how can I steal from you? You're God. And then God says, well, you're not tithing your income to me. That's how you are stealing from me. So I justified that to act justly towards God in the area of money at a bare minimum is to tithe fully to the church where you're worshiping. Okay, so that's the first lesson. It took me 2 years to learn that. And then after that, naturally, I was feeling, like filled with spiritual pride. Through some fancy analytics, I figured out where I ranked in my church in terms of the tithing amount. It was confidential, but they gave out the information in brackets. So I figured that if anyone gave more than me, then this condition wouldn't hold true. So that's how I figured I was giving the most in my church. So filled with spiritual pride, God then shows me the next leg of my homework. One Sunday, my pastor said to me, well, there's someone at church who's got some money problems. I'd like you to sit down with him and see how you can help him. So assuming that my pastor wouldn't have just invited me to attend to someone's money problems, I walked into his office and there I saw this brother and my pastor. And I thought, well, I guess, pastor, you really do think I'm a good steward. You've only invited me to to listen to this brother's problems. Now it turns out that he borrowed 3 years worth of his wages from a loan shark, and allegedly within 72 hours, if he did not repay in full, then the loan sharks were going to hurt him physically. So I thought, well, God brought me here for a reason. There must be a purpose, and God had blessed me in my finances. So let's not say no immediately. So I asked this brother a few due diligence questions. I didn't think there was a lot of time to circulate by email and see, if other people would join to the rescue. So I just asked him 3 questions. Question 1, the money that you borrowed, does it have to do with drugs? He said no. Question number 2, does it have to do with gambling? He said no. I said, last and most importantly, is this the full amount that can bail you, that will save your life? And he said yes. So now I didn't I know the Old Testament all that well back then, but the deal that I structured with him, a Levitical priest would have gone check on every detail. So this is what I decided on the spot. I will lend him the full amount. I will charge him no interest. And then arbitrarily, I said to him, well, if we divide this loan and make it a monthly repayment over 5 years, so divide that by 60, is that affordable to you? And he said, yes, that's really generous. Thank you so much. I was so naive. I did not think there was a chance he was going to default on me, because clearly this was done at church. It's done in the witness of my senior pastor. God clearly brought me to this opportunity to help someone. And I thought, well, your only opportunity cost is you can't invest that money on average for 2.5 years. Well, it's okay. I'm sure, you're ratcheting a lot of brownie points up there for doing this. So in the interest of time, I'll fast forward 2 years. He stopped repaying me after 2 years. But the most bizarre thing that he chose to do was to not leave my church. So every Sunday, I would see him. And I confess that every now and then when I see him, I would have some negative emotions in my heart. I would be thinking to God, am I entitled to being angry? Am I entitled to sit down with him and ask him why he's not repaying me? And if so, with what kind of attitude am I allowed to speak to him? So every now and then, I would see him and these emotions would stir up. But as time went by, I became better and better versed with the Bible. And the parable of the unmerciful servant in Matthew chapter 18 really spoke to me. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into the dynamics of the parable of the unmerciful servant, but basically, I thought if I were going to be mean and nasty to this brother, then basically I'm inviting Jesus to be mean and nasty to me. So that's not very clever, right? So I just decided from that point onwards, I am not going to give him any dirty looks. I'm not going to say anything bad behind his back. I'm not going to interrogate him on why he's not repaying me. And then a lot of time elapsed. And then finally, one day, I still remember crystal clearly where I was standing in my church. And then suddenly, for the first time in my life, I heard an audible voice from God. The Holy Spirit asked me, "When did you lend this money to this brother?" So much time had elapsed. I actually had to pull out my BlackBerry at the time and look in the calendar. And then I answered the question. I said, "God, I made the loan to this brother in 2007. That day was in the year 2014. At that point, I became better versed with the Old Testament, and I knew immediately why the Holy Spirit spoke to me directly for the first time that time. It was the seventh year. It's the year of debt forgiveness. So God was asking me, essentially, are you willing to forgive him of this debt? Now, I quickly justified that, well, if the maker of all heaven and all earth chooses to speak to me for the first time, and if I don't respond positively to him, that's basically like showing him no face. That's not very clever, right? So that, along with a whole host of other reasons, I chose to basically say to the brother, let's rip up the loan agreement. You don't owe me anything anymore. I'm pleased to report to you that today he and I are very good friends, and he has blessed me and my family in a lot of different ways. So praise be to God. This 7-period journey, I think, loosely qualifies as a lesson on how to be merciful in money terms. So the first 2 lessons down, and it took 9 years, and then you can be sure that I was filled with spiritual pride. Not only was I tithing a lot, and now I even learned to basically, cancel a loan after 7 years at the prompting of the Holy Spirit. And then it was my 3rd lesson. December 2014, I was diagnosed, well, I shouldn't say diagnosed. I was never clinically diagnosed, but I was suffering from panic disorder or anxiety disorder. And the reason was money. So I knew I had not arrived because I thought, well, if you're such a good steward, then money shouldn't be bothering you. It shouldn't give you a panic disorder. What happened was, ever since I started tithing in full in 2007, my income just went like this. It just kept going down, 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 down. And yet there were expenses that I was unwilling to decrease. For example, the monthly amount of money that I support my parents and my grandmother, I just refused to decrease that because I didn't want to lower their standards of living just because I was making less money. And then at the end of 2009, I got married to Sylvia, and then we bought our place in 2011, and our daughter Danielle was born in 2011, and then our son Enoch was born in 2014. So you get the picture. The expenses just went going up, 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 and then my income just went down, 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 down. So every month in 2014, starting in January, I had negative cash flow. And over the whole year, basically at the end of the year when I was taking my Christmas break, I was basically staring at this hole of negative cash flow. And I think that's what triggered my panic disorder. So I prayed. I said, Lord, I'm not greedy. Can you please give me a bonus on an after-tax basis that it would cover, that would balance my expenditure for the year? And then God is super faithful. In a few months' time, in early 2015, he gave me exactly that amount. On an after-tax basis, it balanced my budget for 2014. But then I was saying, God, is this how you want me to live going forward? This is not really fun, being in a cash flow like hole and then getting bailed out in the end. Right around the same time, my pastor said to me, well, Roger, you head the stewardship committee at our church, and we probably don't teach enough on Sundays about stewardship and generosity. So why don't you go and find a course somewhere and offer it to the congregation? So I did that. I found the Crown Financial course, and then the very first lesson the very first verse that the guest lecturer quoted, it was like a pin dropping. It taught me, it revealed to me what mistake I've been making my whole life. That verse was Psalms 24, verse 1. The whole earth and everything in it, it belongs to the Lord. So what has been my problem, despite being a quote unquote good steward and being merciful with my money? I was on a revenue split model with God. $100 of income comes in, the first 10 is yours, God, the other 90 is mine. How I save it, spend it, invest it, plan for the future, that's my business. Thank you very much. Now, that is probably the most foolish thing anyone can do, because in the Bible, one of the biggest promises is that God will take care of us. We were not designed to strap on this stress and responsibility. We just have to trust and obey, and God will take care of the rest. So by doing this revenue split model, basically I was saying to God, I don't really need your help. I just need that 90% of my income, and I'll be able to take care of everything. And I also learned from Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 18, that even, say hello, that even my ability to make money, that comes from God. So if God had chosen to take away any of my heartbeats, my breath, my education, my intellect, my any opportunities, my job or whatever, I wouldn't have been able to amass anything in my bank account. So what God really taught me is, naked I came into this earth, and empty-handed I'm going to leave. So everything that I own in between, I'm only a custodian or a fund manager. So I'm really just a steward, and I am fully loved by God, and I don't actually own anything. I'm just a steward of it. So that helped set me free to no end, and I never had another bout of panic disorder ever since. So that was my 10-year healing journey, and that healing is really one of alignment of identity. Instead of thinking that I had to rely on myself and to make a lot of money in order to sustain my lifestyle and also my family's, I'm just a steward. And everything that I have, everything that I've been able to achieve, it all came from God. And that all of this actually means nothing to him. The real KPI is, do we recognize that everything we have is received with open hands? And God is going to place within our sphere of influence and within our sphere of vision, people who are less able to take care of themselves. They are also God's children. Jesus also died for them. Your KPI is, are you willing to use these resources that you freely received? Are you willing to freely use it to help others? If so, I congratulate you, because this is how we accrue eternal riches. And this is laid out very clearly in Luke chapter 12, verses 32 and 33, I believe. And God also promises this. In 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 8, he says he's going to make sure that we can be generous on every occasion. If he doesn't replenish my resources, how can I manage to be able to be generous on every occasion? So this is the super cycle of provision. God gives to me. If I'm willing to freely help others with it, he sees that I'm a good safe pair of hands, and he's going to give me even more as an asset under management. Another zero or whatever, that means nothing to him. As long as you don't place anything in your heart that is above God, that God is your ultimate treasure, then then you are in good standing. Ever since I learned my healing, my church gave me even more opportunities to share my story. So within a span of 2 months, I shared my testimony, exact same testimony for like 20 to 25 times. So much so that I started to get a little sick of myself saying the same thing over and over again. So that was the first time that I was planted the idea that one day when I have time, I'm going to write a book. But I was still working in banking then, and I thought, well, this is not the right time. You don't have time to do this. Shortly thereafter, in early 2016, I had a business trip to go to Shanghai, and I have a very good friend who lives there. He's a chief executive of a very large bank based in Shanghai. So I said, hey, you free for dinner or drinks tonight? He said, well, I've got a Bible study tonight. Would you like to come? And I said, sure. So I got off the plane, got in the car, and then I sensed that the Holy Spirit was nudging me to share my testimony to this group of brothers in Shanghai. So now I didn't want to be rude, so I asked my friend, hey, what have you got prepared for tonight's lesson plan? He said, well, it's been a really busy week. I haven't been able to plan anything. So I said, well, is it okay if I share my 45-minute stewardship testimony? And he said, yeah, that would be great. That would save me a lot of hassle. So I arrive at this 5-star Pudong hotel, and I go to the Chinese restaurant. And without asking the maitre d', I just assumed that, now given that this is Shanghai and you're doing a Bible study, it must be in a private room, right? So I turned to the wing where it's all private rooms, but the maitre d' stopped me. He said, oh, who are you looking for? I said, oh, I'm looking for such and so. He said, oh, no, he's on the other side. Well, I thought, well, what could be on the other side? So I look over, and it's this vast open dining space, and the captain was pointing at the center middle table where it's in this vast open space, and I thought, wow, this is interesting. This is China, and you're doing a Bible study in a pretty public space. So. But that wasn't the thing that worried me the most. I thought, well, I didn't make the reservation, so if anything happened, I'll just bolt. But as I walked closer and closer to the table, I really started to freak out. I was thinking, why is there a Forbes top 75 billionaire in the whole world sitting next to my friend? And I was thinking, Holy Spirit, you want me to tell that person that they actually don't own the money and that the money belongs to God, and that even their ability to generate all that wealth didn't really come from them, that it came from God? So I was really nervous at that prospect. So I sat down, and I was so pleased that they were serving some very nice wine and champagne. So I just went boom, boom. I just drank 2 glasses. And then I prayed. I said, Lord, please help me, give me the courage that I will not water down my message. And if anything, I pray that you will give me a fresh download that's with so much wisdom that it will edify anyone and everyone. And I discovered that when you pray prayers like that, God tends to answer, and he answered me immediately. After my bog standard 45-minute testimony, I really did get a fresh download, which I had never thought about before. And these days, wherever I go in the world, even if I'm only given 5 minutes to speak, I will have skipped everything I've told you so far. And I will only tell you about this download. This download now has a name. I call it the ultimate truth about money. And this is how it goes. If I'm honest with you, when I hear the words, God bless me, I'm really thinking about 2 things. One is having a lot of money and having a long and healthy life. So let's look at each factors individually. In terms of longevity, ever since Genesis chapter 6, verse 3, our lifespans have already been capped at 120 years. So even Moses only lived to 120. And despite thousands and thousands of years of medical advances, no one seems to have broken that cap. So let's take it as a given. We only get to live 120 years maximum. At the time of writing of this book, Bill Gates was the richest person in the world. At that time, he was worth 90 billion US dollars. Now, let's just say that God is even more generous with you. He loves you even more. He gives you 120 billion US dollars. So you have 120 billion US, you live for 120 years. So simple math, that's a billion US dollars a year. So, if we spend 3 seconds to imagine what kind of life that would be like, I think we would come up with adjectives like luxurious, comfortable, and stress-free, right? So now, innately, whether you're a believer or not, even if you're an atheist, innately as human beings, we know that we cannot bring money with us beyond the grave. But let's just say for a second that God allows you to bring that 120 billion US dollars with you and you successfully land in heaven. Friends, this is the moment your problem starts. Now, why do I say that? That sounds really strange. How long is eternity? I think for starters, that doesn't even do it justice. We need to add 120 zeros after the 120 years, right? So less than a minute ago, when we did the simple math of 120 billion US divided by 120 years, we thought it's comfortable, luxurious, and stress-free. Now, you bring that money with you, you land in heaven, but now you have to divide that by 120 followed by 120 zeros. Now, what's the answer to that? It's 0.00001. It is not even enough for you to buy a grain of rice. So the ultimate truth about money is no matter how much money you have, and even if you could bring it with you to heaven, it is still useless. We need to be rich towards God by accruing true riches that Jesus talked about so much. And it's simple. It's not about, whether you're ever chairman of a listed company. It's not about whether you make partner or managing director. It's certainly not about how big your bank account is. The KPI is zero. Look at the poor widow with the 2 copper coins. She was the only person of all time that was commended by Jesus in the area of giving. So ever since I received this download, God continued to have a direct dialogue with me, but the topic has changed slightly. The topic has evolved from stewardship to the ultimate truth about money, and then it became generosity. God, at very specific points in time, told me in different ways to give different amounts of money to different people or organizations. And there were 3 distinct episodes that happened in this order. It started out with small, and then it was medium, and then there was large. Now I'm looking at the clock. I only have 9 minutes. So I'm going to skim over a lot of the stories. The first story is probably the most applicable to, and I think everyone should be able to do this. 2016, I was worshiping a church, and then the seat to my right-hand side was left empty. As the sermon was about to start, this brother I've never seen before walked in late. I've definitely never seen him before in 14 years in worshiping. And he looked exactly like Kenny G. He was Caucasian, and he had that kind of Christmas tree kind of perm in his hair. And he was carrying a saxophone case. I'm a musician, so I recognized that he was carrying a saxophone case. And then when the sermon started, he brought out his Bible. I've never seen anyone's Bible that was so beat up. It was so underlined, so much notes written all over it. So I thought, wow, I should say hello to this brother. So after I said hello, I discovered that he is indeed a professional saxophone player. He just lost his job. He used to play on a cruise ship, and now he was basically playing music in the streets of Hong Kong, trying to earn a living. And now our worship band does not have a saxophone player. So I thought, well, if he's so willing to stay, then maybe he can join our worship team, and then our music can improve. So I brought him to the worship band, and then they started having a conversation. And then all of a sudden, I heard God say 3 words to me: give him money. So I stepped aside, and then I looked in my wallet, and I was checking, how much money I had on me that day. I had 2 $500 Hong Kong dollar notes on me, which is around 500 ringgit. Yeah, something like that. So, and then, so I had 3 options really. One is to ignore the voice of God. Second option is to give half the cash I had on me to this guy. And the third option is to empty my wallet for this brother I've never met before. I chose the last option. So I go back to him and I say, "Excuse me, sir, there's something I want to talk to you about. Can we step aside?" So as we stepped aside, I gave him the money discreetly. And then I said, "Well, what brought you to our church today? I've never seen you before." He said, God told me to come to this church this morning because someone was going to give me money to help me pay my bills. So at that point, I just felt like there was this current of electricity flowing through my body, and I was just shocked at how this small of obedience was able to complete this small-sized miracle. The medium-sized story, it involved a Korean American pastor by the name of Kenneth Bae. He was jailed in North Korea for 2.5 years. He was set free in 2016, and he came to my church to share his story in early 2000. I was very impressed with this story. A few months back, he came back to Hong Kong, and a brother at church organized a small group dinner for him to share. I was in attendance with my wife. After dinner, he started, sharing the agenda for calling this dinner, and he revealed that he wanted to start a new ministry that had 24/7 prayer for North Korea, and to help a lot of the ex-North Koreans who are now living in South Korea to get adjusted to a new life, and to get them to know Christ. Now, suddenly, I heard a number. Now, the dinner was in Hong Kong, so naturally that number should have been in Hong Kong dollars, right? But it wasn't. It was a very specific number in US dollars. And my first reaction was like, "No, God, please. This is too big of a number." So immediately I asked Kenneth Bae a question. I said, "Do you have any idea how much money you need to raise right now to start this new organization?" He said, "I have absolutely no idea." So I thought, phew, so maybe I could ignore it for a while. 2 months later, I received an email. It has a very detailed plan on, line by line on what the expenses are and how to set it up. And at the very bottom of the email was a nice round US dollar figure. It was exactly the same number that I heard at dinner a few months ago. So I struggled for a long time, and in the interest of time, I'll just tell you the punchline. A few months later, I ended up paying that amount. I ended up giving that amount in full. But his budget increased by 40%. So it took 2 other brothers and sisters who were also in attendance at dinner that evening. It also took their faithfulness in order to kickstart this ministry for Kenneth Bae. So God taught me 2 things that through this lesson. One is I'm not the only game in town. That he also relies on, that he also gets other people to accomplish his missions. And then the second thing is, it's his money. I'm his custodian. I'm his steward. So whatever amount that he tells me to give, do not nickel and dime with him. Now, I am again looking at the clock. Chairman Tech saying, can I get another 5 minutes?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Please, go ahead, yes.
Okay, I will complete the large size story. Again, it was 2017. My pastor started to have thoughts about buying our own church premises in Hong Kong. And once I heard it, I was filled with joy in my heart, and I really wanted to give towards this project. And so I looked into my cash statement, and I decided on an amount that I thought was generous. But then I did the math a little bit more, and I realized the problem. The problem is we have a pretty small church. We only have about maybe 70, 75 family units. So basically, every family unit would have had to come up with that same figure in order before we would have any chance of being able to buy real estate in Hong Kong. So I turned away from my cash statement and I looked at my balance sheet. I looked at what assets I had that I could pledge or sell towards this. There was this one stock that was US listed. I bought it during the tech bubble in 2000, and it was $10 at the time. Back then, it was a gaming chip business, meaning if you play video games, normally there would be one of these chips in the computer that would help boost the computer graphics. I did not sell it for 17 years, and unbeknownst to me, it became a leader in the space of artificial intelligence because of its prowess in computing power. So from a $10 stock, it went up 10 times and it became $100. So by definition, it became my largest and most successful investment. And so I thought, well, if it continues to be a leader in the AI space, then it can easily go from 100 to 1,000. So I made this pledge to God. I said, Lord, anything above 100, whenever and wherever you tell me to sell it, I will give half of that profit to you towards buying church premises. I made this promise probably in May or June in 2017. In October, my department got shut down. I lost my job, and instead of immediately looking for a new source of income, I said to myself, you've talked about writing this book for years. Before, your excuse was you don't have time. Well, now you do. If you don't write it now, you're never going to write it. So I thought, okay, let's do the book, and this will be my own form of Matthew 6:33. So I thought that by writing the book, getting a lot of good commentary on it, and finding a publisher and getting it published, that would be my way of seeking first His kingdom and His righteousness. And then, God says he all else will be given to me, right? So I thought that He's going to give me back my normal salaried life thereafter. So I thought, but we'll get back to this very soon. So I lost my job, and 3 months later, my governing period was over. And for the first time in 25 years, I could buy and sell stock freely without any prior approval from my bosses. End of January, it was Trumponomics. The market was good. There was talk of maybe inflation creeping in. So interest rates were starting to get a little jittery. People were starting to worry that rates might go up. I remember so clearly, it was a Friday, February 2nd. The Dow Jones Index, out of nowhere, dropped by an unholy index number of 666 points. Besides this unholy number, I was a bit anxious about what to do with my stock, particularly the one that I had pledged to God, because in a short span of time, it had gone from 100 to over 200. It had more than doubled already. So there was a decent profit already that could go towards the church premises project. So I prayed that Friday and Saturday, earnestly. I said, Lord, please tell me, is there anything you want me to do, in the stock? Radio silence. I slept so poorly on Saturday that I got to church late on Sunday, and I hardly remember what my pastor was saying, except he said this one line that seemed completely uncorrelated with what he was talking about. And I still remember very clearly what he said. He said, normally when God speaks to us, it's in a very soft voice and with very clear and simple words, because He wants us to understand without any mistake. Right after he finished that sentence, I heard one word from God: sell. Now, I thought, okay, I've had lot of experience from hearing from God, so I know this is definitely from you, Lord. But now, couldn't you be a little bit more specific on when to sell, what to sell? Because, well, for the past 25 years, my professional training has been I definitely should not sell tomorrow, because normally when there's a big dip um, in a bull market, chances are it bounces back the next day. And you don't sell them to the dip, Lord, you buy the dip. Um, so I thought, well, I will take this as a well noted with thanks kind of commentary. I will remember this for sure, but Lord, as you give me more instructions, I will do it. I promise you. An hour later, I drove my wife and kids to watch a children's show, and I was grateful that my wife didn't buy me a ticket. So I was able to do my quiet time in the car. My quiet time routine for the last 6 years is as follows: one chapter of Proverbs, one chapter of Psalms, one chapter of Old Testament, one chapter of New Testament. So that day was February 4th. So the Proverbs for that day would have been Proverbs chapter 4. Now, I cannot explain to you why 2 weeks prior to this event, all of a sudden I had this inspiration that I have been reading the NIV for too long and that I needed to change to another translation. So arbitrarily, I changed to the Message. So Proverbs 4 verse 5 in the NIV, which I had read, dozens and dozens and dozens of times before, said this: get wisdom, get understanding. Now, that has nothing to do with investments or anything, right? When I read Proverbs 4 verse 5 from Eugene Peterson's The Message, I almost fell out of my car. He translated it as sell everything and buy wisdom. So as I said it just now, I still feel this electricity current going through my body. So this was the first time that God went multimedia. Not only did I hear his voice, this time it also showed up within an hour in the written word. So right there and then, I knew God meant business. So I just decided I'm going to sell everything tomorrow, because I've accrued this track record of obedience for quite some time, and I'm not going to let some stocks get in my way of my conscience of being perfectly obedient to God. So the next day, in the morning, I sold Asia. In the afternoon, I sold Europe, and in the evening, I sold the U.S. By 11 p.m., I sold everything in my portfolio, including the stock that I had pledged to God for church premises. I sold that stock at 227. So on a per share basis, there was $127 of profit. Half of that I gave to my church. That evening, I slept incredibly well. The next morning, I got up. I prayed a very unusual prayer. I said, Lord, please help me to not feel so stupid when I switch on my phone, and if I see everything has rebounded, please just comfort my heart. I only sold everything because I wanted to be your obedient child. Now, I've been married to my wife for about 10 years at that point, and I had never woken her up because of the stock market. So that morning, when I got out of bed and switched on my phone, I could not help it but to go, Sylvia, 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 you're not going to believe it. The Dow Jones index dropped by another 1,500 points that night after I had sold everything. So again, I feel this electricity current going through my body, and I was having all these different thoughts. I thought, wow, maybe you've upgraded to, super steward status. God is even now telling you when to sell high. Keep praying, maybe one day he will tell you when to buy low. And, the more asset under my management, the more money I can give to others and help the church, da, 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 da. But God just kept telling me to be still, and to do nothing. So for the longest time, over maybe a year and a half since that day, I did not touch the stock market. So, and if I may use one last minute to conclude my story, why I chose not to go back to finance. Before this got published, so before the first copy of this book was sold, God brought me to China, to Christian mass media, which I was not even aware of its existence. And through the same event, I was brought to an opportunity in Israel to speak in India, and then subsequently to be interviewed in China, and then have a short film put on Weixin, and then I went back to speak in Beijing, in Shanghai, and last but not least, to wrap up the year 2011, I was called to Washington D.C. that year. But the most powerful punchline is, before the book was even sold, the mainland Chinese mass media ministry said, well, the mainland Chinese people really need to hear your story. And they immediately started translating my book into Chinese. You may notice that this is actually in simplified Chinese. So the simplified Chinese version was actually published by this Free Self Church in China 5 months ago. And this is basically, during the time when crosses are being taken down, churches are being shut down, and yet not a single verse was detracted from the book. And there's also a study guide for small groups that is intact in this book. And the most beautiful thing is, I don't get a penny from sales from this book, because the Three Self Church publisher does not cut any deals on royalties. So I'm truly using God's resources to do God's work and spreading the message of stewardship and generosity in China. So thank you so much for listening, and I hand it back to Chairman Tech Singh. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Wonderful. Yes. Such a powerful testimony about stewardship and also generosity. And I believe that all of us, as we begin to, read the Word of God, I believe sorry, I didn't unmute myself. Yeah. So what I was saying is that thank you, Roger. As I'm so thankful that to have you here to come and share with us this very, encouraging testimony of the stewardship and also generosity. And that's what it's all about. Because as you continue to delight and walk with God, you see the blessing actually just overflow. All right. So for those of you, I think they are altogether, I think almost 70 of us over here. And some of you are new to Family First and you do not know what Family First is doing. I want to just very quickly just show you what we are doing so that you will know, at least, just to share with you our Family First vision and also our mission. All right. Now, basically, Family First Malaysia is that we exist to transform the next generation, all right? The next generation, especially the next generation's fathers, supported by mothers, to build better families, resulting in a better workplace, a better society, and a stronger nation. So that is what Family First Malaysia, when we started in the year 2016, Tinky and I, we were actually, had the burden to actually start this wonderful movement, also with the encouragement of our Professor Gregory. So we started this movement in Malaysia. And our mission is that we are to partner with like-minded organizations to restore, reshape, and release men and women to become better couples and parents in the context of original marriage with their 3F focus. That means family, better finance, and better fitness. And we focus on these three areas. On the better family side, we have got altogether 6 modules, which I will show you. And also on the better finance, we have got 4 modules, and better fitness, we have got 2 modules, all right? Now, on the better family tools, that we are taking through our these mentees. So we started off with 3 couples in the year 2018, but now I think we have over 100 couples that we are journeying with them, all right, on using the following tools. The tool number 1 is to also share with them how to establish their noble family vision. And tool number 2 is to strengthening their marriage. And tool number 3 is role of a husband. And tool number 4 is role of a wife. Tool number 5, intimacy. And tool number 6 is parenting, all right? So each tool will take about 60 to 90 minutes to actually give our mentees some handles. And after that, after they have learned these tools, so that they can impart to their respective couples whom they have actually brought into to actually mentor them. And the tool number 7, actually will be on the principle of financial stewardship. And today you have heard the powerful testimony of Roger, in terms of how he, really God used him mightily to actually plow the resources into the kingdom. And tool number 8, we are going to have the God's purpose for money, talk about God's purpose for money. And we will be inviting another very, very, I would say, prominent investors who will be coming on. So I have not confirmed with him yet, but very likely that we will get him to actually come and share with us on God's purpose for money with us. And the tool number 9 is managing money as a couple. We realize that especially during this lockdown, 30 to 40% of the couples are quarreling, arguing because they do not have enough money. So that's why it is important for us to always, make sure that we have sufficient reserves. And tool number 10, we will be talking about financial freedom, all right? Financial freedom. And tool number 11, we will actually talk about the cultivating a positive personal habits, so that we will have we will continue to grow old, and gracefully, right? So that once we are healthy, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially, then we will be able to actually grow old gracefully, all right? And that will complete our 12 sessions, 12 modules of our better family tools. So for those of you that you want to journey with us, do connect with us so that we will be able to ask you. And we have already got, I think, 5 couples who are ready to take you through and also to journey with you. All right. So those of you who actually want to actually come and journey with us now. So let me just stop share here, and I'll get through to another one onto the what we are doing right now is that Family First Malaysia, we are going to have this particular contest, all right? The contest that we are going to do is that we will do this contest and photography contest, okay? Now the photography contest, sorry, I think the thing is out of picture. Sorry, yeah. Now let me just, it is to celebrate Mother's and Father's Day, all right? So we are going to have this contest. That means for those families to join us to especially take family photo. So what you do is that all you have to do is to send a creative family photo to us, and so that we will be able to actually judge them, assess them to this information. So those of you, you can always start sending this info to us to info@familyfirstmalaysia.com, and also take on your photograph on the Instagram on the FFM4U, and you will, you will actually stand a chance to win grocery vouchers up to 500 ringgit. All right. So, and we will also, the photos will be judged based on 4 categories. All right. Best family, best couple, best dress, and the most creative. So we will actually use this as a contest, so that all of us can actually go and come in and also join us. Now, please take a picture of this use of handphone take a picture of this photo. So you can go into the Facebook, you can go into Instagram, you can also go into the LinkedIn, all right, to actually follow us and also to join us. So, and also you can invite your friends to also submit their photograph. So for this contest, because this contest, we eventually go into our this family first global website that will be viewed by about 3 million people, all right? So we want to actually allocate this time to Q&A for Roger to answer some question. So are you ready, Roger? Okay, so good. So let me just stop share. Okay, Roger. Now, if you have any questions, perhaps you can post it onto the onto your the chat site, or you can raise up your hand. All right.
Can't see.
So let me see. Let me see. Okay.
So many.
Let me see.
I think May May want to ask question. May May.
Excuse me. Hold on. Okay. Because we have 70 participants, I think it's more than that because some of you share some gadget to come in. So what we do is, it's best that whoever wants it, please put into the chat because we can't see everybody on the screen. Put up your hands and we will get you in. I have one already here. Serene Ng, you have a hands up.
You have a question?
Yeah, you have a question. So please unmute. We unmute you. You put in your question. Serene, are you ready? Serene Ng, we see your hands up. Can I get you to ask? If you're not ready, can I ask?
Okay, Mei, can you just yeah, Mei has got a question. Mei, can you unmute? Yes.
Yeah, unmute. Yeah.
Okay, I'm speaking.
Yes, Mei.
Brother Roger, I'd like to find out what are your thoughts on the post-COVID-19 on the currency US dollar versus ringgit? Because if I understand from the book of Revelation in the Bible, it says that the currency will crash. So what will happen to ringgit in your point of view? I know there's no point stacking our ringgit in the bank account, but you know, on the natural world, what do you think will happen to the US dollars? Thank you.
Okay. Well, I don't profess to have any insight on dollar ringgit, but I do have one insight which I'm already putting into action. Every time there's increase in quantitative easing, the gap between the haves and the have-nots will only increase because of asset inflation. My own view is whenever this pandemic is under control, because of all this cheap, free, or zero-cost money has been pumped into the system, and I think we're already starting to see signs of it. For example, the NASDAQ is already up for the year. That's insane. I think once there's even more light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the economy's reopening, assets are going to skyrocket. So what I've done is God has really changed my heart. Before I was trying to take the minimum risk and guarding my quote unquote nest egg and trying to take minimum risk, not going into equities and just trying to cover my family expenses. But on my birthday a few months ago, God spoke to me powerfully through Psalms 23, which was my Psalms reading that day. Verse 3 says, He's going to make my path straight for His name's sake. I have so much burden in my heart for the poor and disenfranchised that now I am going full throttle in all different asset classes. And my goal is to generate more money, more returns, so that I can give more to help the poor. And it's no longer about raising my own standard of living, and I no longer worry about the provision side. So I just take that as a given now. God will take care of me. But how can I give more? I was constantly struggling with being the one talent servant, in that if I keep on just trying to, make ends meet this way, I will never be willing to give away my quote unquote nest egg. So I believe it is important to go into assets, and it's with the right motivation. The right motivation is not, okay, I'm going to get richer, or I can buy a bigger house, better car, or get out of financial trouble. I think it is important if you have the ability to own assets, do not, this is not a time to be afraid. Do not sit on government bonds or cash. It is just going to become very, very worthless. So hope I kind of address your question a little bit. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Because let me see. Check group. Anyone has any question? No. Okay.
Okay, just
Yes.
you can unmute yourself if you are ready to ask question. Unmute
Okay.
yourself.
Ask question. Hello.
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
My question is, the first testimony where Roger first opened his heart to help the church friend that pastor brought into the office, where Roger took over his loans and helped him pay off. What was the reason that the guy wasn't able to pay? Because apparently he stayed till the end and it became a very good friend of Roger. So this is like a movie. I'm just curious to know. A guy like that, he would have paid back Roger, but why didn't he? So what was the reason? Just curious, that's all.
I never asked him. Seriously, I never asked him, because I saw enough remorse in him. Because at church, if I see him, he would suddenly just avoid eye contact and try to turn the other way. He was embarrassed, and I just didn't feel right to pick under his nose and ask him why didn't. I mean, if he could have paid me, I'm pretty sure he would have. So specifically why he wasn't able to pay me back, I just didn't even want to ask.
Okay, great.
Can I add this one? Because I understand from some teaching, they say that God always in an amazing way to bless the person with a heart to give, to be obedient. You always give to people who will never give you back, and this is called blessing from the Lord. Yeah.
Roger, there's a question. It says how to strike a balance to live a life of Christian in corporate world if corporate KPI crash with Christian KPI.
Well, this is hard. I think it's not a few lines from that could be a straightforward answer. I think it's really important to pray about it. Now most corporate KPIs, I mean, I wonder if you could be a little bit more specific on how it crashes, how it's incongruent with Christian KPI, because I think, how should I say this? I mean, if the corporate KPI is to, I mean, if you can give me a little bit more flavor on how it conflicts with Christian KPI, because I would imagine it's, do more sales, or, reach more people, or make more money, or, so on and so forth. Unless the business itself is really, really, really questionable, then I think by asking you to, reach more people, actually, that kind of increases your exposure to more people you could potentially share your story with, or your testimony with, or to evangelize to. At one point, I worked for CIMB, a bank which you all must be familiar with.
Yes.
I'll tell you a little bit more of my story. I signed an ABN AMRO contract on 2008 after 7 years 8 years at Credit Suisse. And when I was supposed to start for work on April Fool's Day 2008. When I turned up for work, it was no longer called ABN AMRO. It was called Royal Bank of Scotland. So that was the April Fool's Day joke on me. Shortly thereafter, there was a global financial crisis, and then a few years after that, RBS decided to throw in the towel on Asia Pacific. So they searched the world for a buyer, and CIMB ended up being the buyer for our Asia Pacific franchise. So that's how I joined CIMB. As it's kind of like my juzai. I was sold off to CIMB. So there this is the point. When I was at RBS, I approached a senior banker, very, very senior, and he was known to be a good Christian. I wrote him an email and I said, "Brother, what do you think about starting a Bible study or a fellowship in our workplace?" He never spoke to me about it. He never wrote back to me about it. He never pretended to have received that email. So I just thought, well, okay, fine, and I won't, I'm not going to start the fellowship here. But after it became CIMB, it's really interesting how God works. It was at CIMB I started a Christian fellowship, and we met daily. And at first it was me and the Singaporean brother. We just did a devotional for 45 minutes. We came to work early each day. We did it for 9 months before, the first person, the third party joined us. And then it grew in numbers. It grew to maybe a maximum of 12 or 13 people at one point, and we met daily. And a lot of people became Christians this way. So I think technically, CIMB is, to say the least, it's definitely not a Christian organization, and yet God can help a Christian fellowship flourish in there. So wherever you are, I think as long as you're willing, God can help you to make the best out of any situation. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I have one question in the chat group. This is a very simple, direct question.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, this person will get comfort to hear you. The question is like that. Mr. Roger, you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned about tithings.
Mm-hmm.
What if I have my tithings to give to church? No extra cash in hand this month, but a church member asked for help on cash. So can I use the tithe money to give first?
Okay. Well, I go by a few simple principles, and this actually, I learned this from the Family First global founder, the Honorable Ambassador Gregory Slayton. He talked about this verse a lot, and that is 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 30.
Yes.
Whoever honors God, God honors him. So now, if you honor God in your finances, God will honor you in your finances. Now, this is not prosperity gospel. I'm not saying that he will definitely bless you like the next day or the next month or the next year. You need to have your heart in the right place. Now, having said that, as long as you choose to, well, I'm not going to give you any direct advice. I would just ask that you pray. Because if you pray and God knows that, your heart is in the right place, he can do anything. He can do anything, especially if your friend who is also in need also needs it, righteously, if for the lack of a better word. If it's a genuine need and God takes notice of that person's need, he can bless you. He can provide for you just supernaturally.
Yep.
So I would ask that you both pray together, but I would urge you to not steer the tithe away from God. Always honor him first.
Yes, that's right.
And then, again, it's not dissimilar to the principle in Matthew 6:33. So seek him first always.
Yes.
If you're in alignment with him, nothing is impossible.
That's right.
Yeah, thanks, Roger.
Yeah.
Roger,
That's right.
I think there's a question here. From one of them, you say you quote many Bible verses, but anyway, Anthony,
yeah,
you can, no, you can pick up Roger's book. I think his Bible verses are all in the book. All right,
Yeah.
Anthony. And here there's another question. With the USD 2 point, say about nearly 3 trillion stimulus package, all right, introduced by US government, the rest of the world is now going to promote more QE. How do you see the way forward for us, Christians, to prosper in this time of Great Depression, which may be even worse than the Great Depression in the 1930s? So many of us have not practiced what Joseph did in the Bible, save in years of abundance so that we could use our financial resource kept away in times of famine. For the next few years, as an experienced banker, what would you see the fractional banking system would take us into?
Well, I think, I partly addressed that in terms of more QE. I think the haves will have more and the have-nots will have even less. So the gap, the rich-poor divide is going to grow even more. I think at some point the whole system is going to blow. But until then, I don't think we're quite there yet. There's going to be one massive episode of asset inflation. Now, I think it is important for Christians to prosper, especially in this time. But it's not for self-enrichment. It's not for elevation of standard of living, but it's to help reach the people that God really cares about. I mean, if you look at Matthew 25, from verses maybe 33 onwards, God cares a lot about those who cannot help themselves, those who are sick, those who are poor, those who are hungry, so I think we need to be wise. I mean, in a way, this is all just a game. No matter how much you earn, when we go to heaven, all this earth money, it gets resets to nothing. It's meaningless. But what you do with it now, you can not only enrich yourselves eternally, where that's where you really should be focusing on in terms of enriching yourself. You can also do this for Jesus. Jesus identified as, if you give him food, if you give someone hungry and food, you're doing that for Jesus. If you clothe someone who doesn't have enough warm clothes, you're doing that for Jesus. Can you imagine how pleased God the Father will be?
Wonderful. Yeah, good.
That's right.
Okay, now, Roger, you mentioned about acquiring. There's a question put forward to you, asking you when is a good time to acquire asset.
Well, okay. Before I ask that, may I ask for what purpose? Because that's most important. Where's your heart in and why you want to ask this question? I
asked this question, Roger, because I want to acquire land bank for farmers, because in our country we may be running low in food. So I don't know. It's just a calling.
No, that's really cool. That's really cool. I think the time is now, because I think the time is now to acquire assets. I think you're going to see this massive asset reflation. It's basically, it's for the wrong reason, but the whole system is being pumped so much rocket fuel right now. I've gone from taking practically very little risk to now I'm going full throttle. Now, I'm not guaranteeing, I'm not recommending, you to do anything that you wasn't planning to. I'm just sharing my own experience. I'm not a financial consultant, so on and so forth. So I want to give you all the caveats, but I want to not only do this to increase my ability to give to the poor, but also, even if it blows up in my face, this is going to be a testimony to tell that I was willing to let go of the safety net of my nest egg and the purpose for doing that was not foolishness. It may look like foolishness in the eyes of men, but I am very convinced that in the eyes of God, that it is taking risk for the right reason, and yeah, it's a testimony and to be unfolded.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, another one for you, Roger. What is your view on cryptocurrencies?
Okay. Now I had a sudden heart change about this. I'll tell you my view up till 48 hours ago, and then I'll share with you a question that I asked my private banker. Up till 48 hours ago, I was very against, cryptocurrencies. I was thinking that, well,
Daddy, can you fix phone?
okay, just wait. I was thinking, okay, here. I was thinking that, well, what types of people would be seeking after the anonymity? So it definitely had a negative connotation, and I just felt that it was difficult to see through the reason behind and how it actually works, and how anyone can guarantee that this is a finite supply of bitcoins, for example. And then last but not least, the exchanges. That's the only way you can transact bitcoins and store bitcoins. So not only are you taking the price risk on the cryptocurrency itself, you're taking on an exchange risk. And so I can't say that hand on heart I can endorse, I would recommend that. Having said that, 48 hours, maybe yesterday or the day before, I asked my private banker whether they would support cryptocurrency, and then they said no. And I was thinking about looking into it, because not so much of the cryptocurrency, but because of blockchain, and because it is definitely going more and more into a cashless society, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
But everything that doesn't go my way now, I see it as God's way of protecting me. So the fact that my private bank would not allow me to transact in cryptocurrencies, I just shrugged it off. I said, this is God's way of protecting me. So now it may work out in the end, but I'm not, and I haven't prayed thoroughly about it. So, and I still have some reservations. That's all I can say about it, I think.
Yeah, Roger, there's another question here is, how do you apply the talent principle in the current situation? So asking you to give one or two specific applications. So what class of assets that you had in mind?
Oh, okay. Well, again, I must make the caveat that I'm not advising any of you into any investing in any asset classes, and that you should only take risk in that you're comfortable with, and don't take my word for it. But okay, so the talent principle in my situation, at least, I've evolved from different types of the one talent servant. I was very, very, I mean, at one point I put it in just US dollar savings. That was a few years ago. And then it evolved into, after I didn't have a job, and yet God told me to be still. So I did maybe a little bit more risk than just US dollar savings. I did some dual currency deposits, where it earns a higher yield, but basically it's just switching from one currency to the other, assuming that there's no drastic change in direction. Then that was okay. But so, cut the long story short, the current situation, well, I recently got burned a little bit in crude oil. but not burned so badly. At one point, when I heard that oil futures traded to negative, I just assumed that the ETF that I bought, would have blown up, and that investment would have been written off. I was very pleased that the ETF actually had a rolling policy. It rolled into the next month's futures ahead of that catastrophe, but they also rolled into further dated. They rolled into September and then subsequently to October and December. So even though front month oil prices are back to the same point when I bought into oil, it is still at more than a 50% decline in investment value. But I am still convinced that you cannot press a balloon into the swimming pool for too long. It will pop, and it is. So oil but it's a small fraction of my investments. I'm very big on gold and silver now. And I'm also, going from zero in equities, I've gone to quite a big percentage into Hong Kong and China equities. I have stayed out of U.S. equities, but more for my sleeping patterns, because I don't like to stay up, and so I thought, well, I think the future's in China, and so it doesn't really matter. I mean, I think it's best to invest in the market that's closest to your heart, and each market has enough opportunities, and so I just chose to invest in Hong Kong and China equities, together with precious metals and
Yes.
and some high yield bonds, but not very much.
Yeah. The Bible says so clearly. God says, isn't it? Silver and gold are mine. So yeah, that's a key to that. Yeah.
We have Ting or Nick. You have a question, right?
We have one, Brother Ting.
Brother Ting.
Brother Ting, do you want to ask a question? Because you raised up your hand. You can unmute yourself. Yeah. Unmute. This will be maybe the last question, because we don't see any question coming.
I think the question I have has been answered. Basically, I wanted to know all that you have covered, which is very fascinating. And it's really a true life stories. It's hard to get everything down. So I just wonder whether that is in your book, Lost and Found. All that you have said are covered in a book.
Yeah, thank you, brother. I'm pleased to report that there's actually a lot more in the book. There are additional stories of just supernatural stories of giving, and the book gives you more background of where I came from. I was more like a Gideon. I did not think that I was worthy to attend a certain conference in Singapore in 2015 when I was just out of nowhere. I was invited to this conference, and it was touted as like the Davos World Economic Forum equivalent in Christendom. And then I was just thinking, well, I'm nobody. I'm seriously a nobody, and why do I even get to go? And the fee was expensive, and they said you have to write a white paper. I had to look up on Google, what is a white paper? A white paper is some policy paper where you basically have some really legitimate point of view to share on policy. And I was thinking, I don't have anything to say. I mean, I'm a nobody. So I struggled for so long, and that was like a 5-month story. And that was at least, a third of 20% or 30% of the book. But then at the end of it, I'll give you the punchline. I won the award for the best white paper in stewardship.
Oh, wonderful.
And, I never would have imagined in a million years that would be the outcome of that struggling story. It was struggling right up to the 2 minutes before I got up to stage to do a panel discussion, and and it had to do with some biological problems. I'll save you the humor in the book. I'm not trying to sell my book, by the way, but in the interest of time, that's all I can share.
All right. Now, those of you who would like to get a copy of the book, please contact our office at 010-288-117. Right. Okay. So
can I just follow up with what Roger had just said just now? Hi, Roger.
Hi.
You just said just now about the white paper, but also your book is being published by the Tree South Church. So presumably that your book now is being sold in all the bookshop of the Tree South churches. I wonder whether the house church people group how do they get copies? That's number one. And number two, so in terms of your portfolio now in Hong Kong, with all the crazy thing, riots and going on, you being, your citizenship is still Hong Kongers, is it?
Well, I'm Hong Kong, and I also have a Canadian passport.
Okay, yeah. So are you still, going in terms of the Three South churches where not just your book being published, but also publicly being invited to speak openly?
No, thank you, brother. These are excellent questions. The craziest thing is I have never walked inside any Three Self churches in my life. I do not know anyone at the Jiangsu Three Self Church publisher. And yet, God made it happen. The book is not only available at all the Three Self churches in the Jiangsu province, the company that helped facilitate this to happen is called Eight Blessings Communications. They have on their WeChat, you can buy the book through their WeChat, and so effectively that becomes available nationwide. My story has also been recently featured in Jingjie, which is supposedly, again, I'm not very well versed in Christian mass media in China. Supposedly that's like the top-notch Christian mass media ministry, I guess. And they also, so in terms of, now the thing is, I am not a marketing person, I'm not a strategic person, so up to this day I have not done a lot of active marketing on either my English books or my Chinese books.
Yep.
It has come this far, honestly, purely based on the grace of God. This is 100% God's initiative. Do pray for me, because on Tuesday, I'm going to film. I'm going to, use God's money and that God's put in my pocket to fund filming for ads that I'm going to put on Facebook and Instagram, because I felt for a long time that sales in North America and Australia, it's really lagged behind. And it's not because I get bad reviews. People who do review it, really love it. So I'm just thinking that, it's not for book sales anymore. It's not for money. It's not for, provision.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, honestly, it's for the love of God. And my vision is to unveil the deceitfulness of wealth. My vision is to basically, by the grace of God, through his power, I want to have a battle with mammon. Because the main reason why Christians do not bear more fruit is the deceitfulness of wealth. And I truly believe now, even a year ago, I would not have said this so boldly, but it is now beyond doubt in my heart that there's been so many supernatural incidents and so many supernatural words that's been spoken into me, that I believe that God created me for this purpose, that he gave me the story, and that he placed me such that I can speak to both the rich and also to the poor.
Yep.
Hallelujah. Father, I just want to thank you for this wonderful session that we have with Roger Lam. And we know that, Lord, that you raised him up for such a time as this to be a blessing into the kingdom. You have indeed, the Lord, that used family first to be a conduit and a channel of blessing to many people who are in need. And Lord, that you continue, Lord, to also bless each and every one of them, especially the family couples, that you continue to use them mightily for your glory. Lord, that as we begin, Lord, to just journey on, and we know that, Lord, that your word says very clearly, those who delight in your word by day and by night, they shall be like a tree planted by the river, that their leaves will continue to flourish, that they will continue to prosper and they multiply.
Yes.
And Father, we thank you that we see that Roger Lam's life is indeed a fruit that has been planted, and also for your glory as well.
Amen.
We want to thank you, the Lord, for many, many more of these sessions and even fellowship that we can come together, and many of the couples that we are journeying with them, that their lives will be blessed, not just physically, not just only emotionally, spiritually, but also financially as well. We want to thank you. We want to bless you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Amen.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roger.
It's a really wonderful time. Thank you.
Same
You want to take another picture, Texting?
Yes, we take another picture. All right. Just hold on.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
everybody smile.
Everybody smile.
At your best.
Yeah.
Smile. This is not candid camera. This is a real camera. Let's smile. 1, 2, 3. Say Jesus. One more
Yes.
time.
Jesus.
Okay, Raymond. Good to see you there, Raymond.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So bye-bye the rest.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you
God
next
bless you all.
same
Take
time.
care.
Same
Thank
time.
you. Shalom.
We will inform you.
Shalom. Hey, Roger, so we can connect, huh? Okay.
Yes. Yes,
Shalom.
sir.
Thank you. Wonderful.